Check Podcasts.
Hi, I'm Bruce Williams. I'm the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to Chamber Chats, coming to you as always from the podcasting studios here at the Czech Media Group, one of our chamber champions. I'd like to acknowledge, as always, that I live and work in the ancestral lands of the Lekwungen-speaking nations, known to us as Songhees and Esquimalt. The Chamber Chats is made possible by the support of Island Savings, a division of First West Credit Union, who are redefining what banking means to community, to people, and the world. So here's my day, okay? Here's what's going on. For reference, I woke up this morning in Kelowna. I was in Kelowna at a business conference. I flew back this morning to Victoria, which of course means that I flew through one of Canada's greatest airports, and in my opinion, maybe the greatest of them all, YYJ. Victoria Airport is a fantastic facility, and we're going to talk about that today with Elizabeth Brown, who is the president and CEO of the Victoria Airport Authority. Elizabeth, how are you?
I'm great, and thank you so much for having me, Bruce. I'm very excited to speak to you, especially with such expert in broadcasting.
Yeah, I've been in a lot. You've been in a lot of airports in the world, so have I. Victoria really is exceptional. I have to say that just because of all the work that's been done over the last few years. But let's talk about what's been done in the last little while.
Well, the pandemic was a lot of bad things for a lot of many people, including the airport and aviation industry. But one of the good things is that we were able to do a lot of work around in the airport in Victoria International. We really focused on some of the infrastructure improvements and really advanced some of our capital projects that have an impact on passengers. But when you have less passengers in the terminal building, obviously the impact is not significant. So most recently, we expanded our parking lot. We added 300 spaces. For those of you who come through on long weekends or through that busy summer travel period, we ran out of parking. So we desperately needed that parking space. We also are doing some of those parts of capital improvements that aren't seen by the traveling public, but are really important to the infrastructure. And that's the work on the runway system, ensuring that we are compliant with all the regulations. One of the big projects that you will see all throughout the summer, actually, which is a continuation of a 2-year project, is an area called the runway end safety area, which is an area on the end of either one of the runways, which is developed in the event that if an unfortunate accident happens and an aircraft runs off the end of the runway, it's a way to stop the aircraft before it gets into, off the airport property. So you're going to see some construction on that. That was a long and lengthy investment that we've been making for the last couple of years. And, some of the other improvements in terms of food and beverage and some of the concessions, extended hours and expansion of the spinnakers, which is in the post-security area. So all of those sorts of things to really positively impact the passenger experience.
I actually did some shopping at the airport on my way out. I was going to a British Columbia chamber gathering. And when we all get together, we bring things that we do for a gift exchange. So I bought a bottle of Victoria gin and took that to exchange with the other folks. So that's, again, it's the part of the experience. I want to talk about the lounge expansion and changes too. But you mentioned spinnakers. You've got the fickle fig in there. You've still got all these opportunities. But that's a part of the experience of traveling the airport, right?
It is part of the experience, but also more importantly, it's also really part of the revenue generation that we need to make here at the airport, right? So the airport authorities generally across Canada are not-for-profit entities, but we have to be financially viable. And the way we are financially viable is being able to stimulate that spend. So thank you very much for buying a bottle of Victoria Gin.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also about making sure those opportunities are available for our passengers, partly for their convenience, but also partly because it's a revenue opportunity in the same way that parking is. And of course, our other revenue opportunities are in landing fees from the airlines and, of course, land development. So all of those parts of what we do is really important so that we can continue to have the funds available to keep this infrastructure operational, regulatory compliant, and being able to make the investments that we need for its future.
A couple of the airports I've been through in the last year and a half are Frankfurt, Germany, and Istanbul, Turkey. And when you're walking through those airports, I kind of feel like I'm in a shopping mall. Your experience is completely different from that.
It is. We have an interesting balance here in Victoria where we try to make sure there's an ease of movement through the airport, that people are not stressed coming through the airport. We want that smaller town feel to it, but at the same time, we want those services available. So we're not the shopping mall of Istanbul. And I know I ran one of those airport shopping malls down in the Caribbean, and it's an important part of the experience. But we also want to make sure that people have places to be quiet, and making sure that we have facilities that are available for people with special needs, and some of those other kinds of elements of the travel that's more than just the shopping element.
Another part of it too, the experience there is the arrival departure area is in no way claustrophobic, right? Some people who have a bit of anxiety about flying could be in a very contained type area very often in an airport. No, not at YYJ. That's not the case. So that's beautiful. It's open and airy. Tell me about that.
Well, I think one of the most important features that we have here in this airport is that it establishes a sense of place within the terminal building, not only with the wood products that you see in the beams, but also the fact that we have all this natural light. Bruce, as you know, I lived abroad for quite some time, and whenever I'd come home, I'd breathe the fresh air, I'd see the sunshine and just all that we have to offer. And that is so important for us to preserve here because this is the first and last point of an oppression that people have of Victoria, right? So we need to make sure that we're representative of what we have here.
Another part of the experience is the landscaping that's outside. And I mean, there's plants inside too, but the landscaping is pretty funky. It's a pretty nice looking airport for all that stuff. Tell me about
It,
that.
well, it is, and of course we emulate the City of Flowers, right? So we have also some artwork that is combined with that landscape, and we have some beautiful welcome poles that were done by the Wasanich First Nations, some of their premier artists. We have the large flowers that are at the front. And then, of course, just all the flowers that we have as part of our landscaping. And of course, I don't know whether you've noticed, Bruce, we also have our pollinator garden, which is at the entrance of the airport, which is part of our biodiversity commitment as part of sustainability. And it's just this lovely garden that uses local Indigenous plants to really foster pollinators, which helps our agricultural industry here on the peninsula.
Yeah, because you're close by some agriculture out there in North Saanich where you are. I want to go back. You mentioned working at other airports. You've had quite a. You're from here. This was a homecoming for you, but
Yeah,
you've had quite a journey around the world. Tell us about the path that brought you here.
Yeah, I am so fortunate. I started as a customer service representative working in an airport in an information booth. And throughout my career, I've been able to take advantage of other opportunities. I moved to Montego Bay, Jamaica as the chief commercial officer for the largest airport in the country of Jamaica. And you got to recognize airports are an economic driver to a country. And when you are the biggest airport for an entire Caribbean nation, you can imagine that importance that is for those people, for their economy. What a great way for me to learn about commercial development and the importance of linking your tourism destination and those things that are close to the heart of those local people. From there, actually, it was supposed to be a 3-year contract. I ended up there for 8 years. And then I moved on to California for 3 years, where I was part of a very unique project that opened up a terminal check-in facility in the United States on the border, connected by a 150-meter pedestrian bridge to the Tijuana International Airport in the country of Mexico. Nothing like it anywhere in the world. What an amazing opportunity. And then from there, I went to Florida, and I was part of one of the only privatized airport operations in the country of the United States. Most of their airports are municipal or government run, and we were a private contractor tasked with operating the Orlando Sanford International Airport. So again, another really interesting experience, and I've had exposures to many different types of models of airport operations. I'm so lucky that I could come back home and be able to use that experience, hopefully to the benefit of this airport and this community.
Yeah, well, we're lucky to have you back here too. You mentioned the the COVID word a little while ago. So that had a huge impact on your facility and on our economy in general. I want to talk specifically how that impacted Victoria Airport. We'll do that next. Our guest on Chamber Chats today is Elizabeth Brown. She is the president and CEO of the Victoria Airport Authority. So, Elizabeth, in the time of the pandemic, when recovery started to happen again and when things were reopening, there were issues with bringing back baggage handlers and pilots and air traffic controllers because it had been shut down for so long. They moved on to other opportunities. Tell me where that's at now in recovery.
Well, I would say that we are in a pretty good state when it comes to having a critical number of airport workers here at the airport, working for our ground handlers and our airline partners and our food and beverage operators. We still struggle with some of the challenges. I mean, it is a costly place to live. It's costly for people to, have rented places where they can function. But we're working through that with our operators. Our operators have found ways to, create other incentives for people to work. And so I'd say from that perspective, we're pretty much recovered. From a passenger perspective, we're not quite yet recovered. We've still got some time to go. That's complicated issues relating with the aviation industry. COVID and that ugly word has had such an impact on every aspect from workers, but also supply chain issues. The cost of bringing in aircraft into airlines, the being able to attract pilots into the industry, and all of those obstacles that they have to become a commercial pilot. So we're still working through that as an industry. We've got a ways to go. We're not there yet, but I think we'll be there probably by the end of 2025.
Yeah, I think the term is route development, but the number of options for people to fly to and from different places from here, what's that look like in the immediate future?
So, we have to remember we're competing for that valuable asset. It's called an airplane. And an airline has a choice of where they can put it and where they think they can maximize their profits. So, we are really at the airport taking a little bit of a step back and making sure that we understand what our market is and that we have the appropriate data to speak to the airlines to substantiate to them that this is a viable market for them and that they can operate nonstop air services out of Victoria International Airport and do very well, both from an outbound and an inbound perspective. Our key markets as we look forward domestically, we really need to see better connectivity. Our biggest markets that aren't served here in Canada are Ottawa and Halifax. And those are really important markets for us domestically. As we look southbound, Los Angeles and San Francisco are really key markets for us to try and attract again. But making sure that we are getting the combination of the destination that we want to go to, but also affording the maximum number of connections to get us to other places. So it's making sure we have the right match of the aircraft, the airline, and the destination in terms of route development. So I think, in the next year or so, you'll start to see some real movement. We're making some significant investment, and we're also cooperating with our many partners, obviously, including the Chamber of Commerce and many of your members, but Destination Greater Victoria, to help us keep Victoria front of mind to those airlines when talking to them about the opportunity that they have to fly here.
Yeah, you hear people say it would be great if we had service to Palm Springs because a lot of people go there. San Francisco, you mentioned that service had been in place in the past. Hawaii, places like that. Any insight on that?
Sunspot destinations are doing actually fairly well for us. We've seen some really good growth into the Mexico market this year. We saw Puerto Vallarta, Cancun, and Los Cabos come back into the market, and think we'll see that growth continue. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Hawaii. One of the things that we're finding with U.S. sunspot destinations, Las Vegas is another one, is our passengers are finding that the cost of going to, say, Vegas for 3 days is about the same as 7 days to Mexico. So some of those airlines are almost competing with themselves in those markets. I think that those over time will grow. A lot of it will have to do how the Canadian dollar does against the US dollar to make those viable options for people and make them sustainable. But we'll continue to grow. And when you talk about destinations like Palm Springs, it's probably not sustainable all by itself. So going to the right city that has destination traffic as well as connecting traffic is really key for us. So that's why San Francisco makes so much sense, because United Airlines and Air Canada are partnered together, and then they can connect to the rest of that Star Alliance world.
So we see, excuse me, we see Air Canada and WestJet and Alaska Air and Pacific Coastal and all of those guys. But the one that was added last year was Porter. Tell me about Porter Airlines.
Porter Airlines is a really interesting airline. They go into a lot of underserved markets, and they started operating on what I believe is a really perfect jet aircraft for this market. When you have a bigger plane, it means you need more people to make that sustainable. And they operate an Embraer. That is a smaller aircraft that takes only about 120 to 130 seats. And that's the perfect sweet spot aircraft for us. It can fly long haul across country, but it doesn't require all of those people to fill it. And it can still be viable from a profitability perspective for the airline. So I think you'll start to see more of those types of aircraft. Alaska Airlines flies a similar type of aircraft from Seattle. They've just actually increased. They've gone from 2 flights a day to 4 flights a day. And that's just telling you that that's the right aircraft for our market. We can get a smaller jet to fly more often to the destinations that we need to go to rather than one larger jet that only goes every other day.
Many people were excited to see the concept of discount airlines coming here because it happens in Europe for short hauls and that sort of thing. It's been tried here, but it hasn't exactly been the outcome that was hoped for. We're going to talk about that next. Our guest on Chamber Chats today is Elizabeth Brown. She is the president and the CEO of the Victoria Airport Authority. So the discount airline thing this is a big country. It's different than, flying a little hopper from Warsaw to London or from Dublin to Stuttgart or something. It's a whole different thing here, right? Tell me about that.
It is really a different thing here because we are geographically advantaged and challenged, right? So if you're flying south the United States, our flights tend to leave super early in the morning so they can reach those banks of connections. When you talk about a low cost carrier, that model is about putting in a large number of passengers in a low airfare, and they have to keep their overall cost down, which means they need to have really good aircraft utilization and flight utilization. It's difficult to do that when the average flight distance in Canada is usually 3 hours plus, right? So that is really a challenge for this. We also, at the end of the day, we look to our neighbors to the south. Well, that is a market of 350 million people. We are a market of 35 million. So inherently, it's much more difficult to make a go of it here in Canada. I think that we have some good opportunities with that. I think Flair Airlines is a good example. Flair Airlines is kind of finding that balance between super ultra low cost carrier and low cost carrier. They're kind of finding that middle of the road. And I think that they've got some real good opportunity with some of the flights that they've been flying here out of Victoria. And I think that we'll continue to see them hopefully grow in the future. Porter Airlines is not a low cost carrier, but they again have a good sweet spot in that they have the right sized aircraft that suits our market.
How much is the cost of airline fuel a factor these days?
It is a factor. It is definitely a factor, but it's not just that. It's also the cost of the pilots and the crew. When you talk about the challenges that are faced in labor, you've got a pilot that it might take $120,000 for them just to become a commercial pilot. But now you overlay the cost of actually hiring that pilot. We've seen negotiations that are 35 to 45% more increases in salary. So, it's a combination of a lot of things that are happening in the market. There's also not enough supply of aircraft. So the cost of aircraft are becoming themselves much more expensive. And then when that becomes more expensive, inherently all of those things will influence the cost of airfares.
A sustainable and reliable source of airline and aviation fuel in BC and in Canada is something that's coming along as an issue now, too. Because if we can't source that stuff locally, that means that the product is going to be purchased elsewhere, and that feeds another economy instead of ours. Where's that at?
So there is actually a lot of activity happening in the Sustainable Aviation Fuel Forum. There is a Canadian Sustainable Aviation Fuel Association who is working together with the provincial and the federal governments to try and find ways to stimulate production, because it is production. It's a challenge, but it's not unique to Canada. It's also a big challenge in the United States as well. And arguably, they've got a much bigger market with a higher demand. So, we've spoken with airline partners. They have a vested interest to try and see that demand. But it's not just about sustainable aviation fuel. That is one piece. And the good thing about sustainable aviation fuel is it can be mixed with regular Jet A1 fuel. So you can actually have a mix of both. So you don't necessarily have to have a complete replacement of the product. But there's also lots of excitement happening in technology from electric. We've seen our local float plane operator here who's starting to experiment with electric aircraft. And I think hydrogen fuel cells will start to come out. And I think you're seeing a lot of major carriers around the world to really invest in that technology. What we talk about today in terms of cost of fuel will be a completely different conversation, I believe, in 10 years, as all that technology will really start to take root, and we'll really see those alternative opportunities for airlines to really, reduce their carbon footprint while still flying happen in the future.
Yeah, I mean, climate change is a real thing, and controlling the outcome of that is something that's addressed by aviation in general. But another example is the building that I spoke about, where the arrival and departure lounge at your place has lots of natural light, which means you don't have to generate another source of light using energy to do that, right? There's a number of things that you're doing. Tell me about the other energy sufficient stuff.
It's an energy, and it's also biodiversity. We talked about the pollinator garden. That's an important part of the commitment to sustainability. We are starting to electrify our fleet. So every year, as we replace vehicles, we replace them with more electric solutions. But we also make investments. We have two fish bearing creeks that run through the airport. A lot of people don't realize that. They are part of the traditional fishing waters of the Wasanich people. And it's important that we are able to maintain them as fish bearing creeks. This year alone, we're putting $600,000 into the restoration of one of those creeks. That really represents the end and the culmination of a 10-year commitment that to really make sure that those creeks are very viable. That's an important part of biodiversity. And then the other piece is also reducing our waste, so waste reduction, water consumption reduction. All of those things are elements that we're doing. The challenge we do have, though, is that, I'm looking around at the window, and this is an old infrastructure. That some of this building was built in the 70s. And so there are some challenges just inherently in the sustainability capabilities of this building that we'll have to address in the future, which may look into terminal expansion. And as we look at terminal expansion, what are some of those initiatives that we can introduce that are much more sustainable than what the capacity is of this existing terminal?
And there's other infrastructure that's going to be put in place. There's a hotel coming, for example, that will soon be there. I don't know when the groundbreaking is, but that's soon. It'll be a restaurant there. So tell me about some of those other things that are happening on what we call the airport land.
Well, on the airport lands, those are important. It's some of the last available industrial land on the Saanich Peninsula. So we've seen some exciting investment over the last couple of years. Obviously, we know about the Amazon distribution center that's here that became operational last year. The hotel did break ground actually last week. I don't know if they've done I don't think we've done an official groundbreaking, but they've certainly started moving dirt around, and we're very excited. I think they'll be done in about 18 months. And that hotel is an important addition to critical hotel inventory that we need in Victoria. I mean, anybody who has family and friends coming to visit who may not be staying with them struggle with finding a hotel. So that's an important addition to the inventory. Some of the other lands we're looking at, with about 200 acres that we have available, I think that hotel will really be a stimulation point, and we'll see some other types of businesses that are complementary to that hotel business start to invest and open up in the airport in the coming years. And that's another piece of our revenue. We make revenue from passengers and from airlines, but also from that land development.
Because actually, I flew over that this morning, and I was wondering. I wonder if that's the hotel that they're breaking ground on. So it is. It's right. It's near the highway and Beacon Avenue, right? In that
That's right.
in that jurisdiction. Yeah, that's exciting. You mentioned what you're doing as well with the Wasanich Nations. Tell me about that partnership and what you do with them.
Well, as you're aware, and I know you also have your acknowledgement, we do sit on the traditional lands, the Wasanich Nations, which represents four communities: Sartlip, Sekim, Pakwajin, and Sayout. And we have been in discussions that was started by my predecessor for a couple of years to really develop a meaningful partnership with the nations, with those First Nations. And part of it is, how can we find ways for them to participate in the business of the airport? How can we find ways to represent their culture on the airport by having more of a sense of place? And how can we help them develop their youth in the future? And it's kind of mutual. We've talked about the needs for pilots and people working at the airport. There is a natural opportunity for us to be able to work with our First Nations partners to develop those opportunities for the youth in the future. So I think we're very close to really formalizing that relationship. Yeah, as the airport authority, we are prepared to make a significant commitment in working with them on the business of the airport, and they are committed to trying to work with us for the mutual benefit of their communities, of the airport, and of the overall peninsula area and the capital region. I'm very excited. I'm hoping that we'll be able to really finalize that and move that over the line and really move forward with helping them with future developments.
And thank you for doing that. And I wanted to thank you for partnering with us at the Chamber too with something called the New to Canada Fund, which is something that we're going to do for newcomers having been in Canada for less than 3 years that want to buy and start a business through the support of the airport and some others. We're going to be allowing those people to join the Chamber at no charge. They will draw money from that fund to join the Chamber. So you're doing that along with Air Canada, who's one of the partners, and Western Interior Design. So thank you for that. Just really quickly, almost out of time, how can people engage with you and the team at the airport for like consultation or anything like that? What sort of avenues are there for that?
There's actually a number of avenues. There's the obvious one through any of our social media channels and also through our website. But we also have public meetings. We spend a lot of time going out to the public. And one of the things that, coming out of COVID and the opportunity I have is, how can we really leverage those meetings? So we have two meetings every year called the Airport Consultative Committee meeting, which happens usually in various areas around the community. And we also have our annual general meeting. We actually just had that 2 weeks ago. And we publicize those and let people know they're open to the public. We want to engage with the public. And as we look towards the future, we're looking at some significant investments. We do need to address some of the infrastructure challenges here at the airport, and we will be wanting to engage with the public, because this is all of our airport. This is their airport, it's my airport, it's your airport. This is to serve the community. So these public outreaches are going to be really important in the future, so we can hear from people about what they think.
Elizabeth Brown is the president and CEO of the Victoria Airport Authority, my favorite airport. And I'm not just saying that, it really is. Elizabeth, thanks for all you're doing and thanks for your time today.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you very much, Bruce.
You bet. I'm Bruce Williams. We'll see you again for another Chamber Chat.